Jordan Seng is not your typical pastor, and Sonya Seng is not your typical pastor's wife. In our September show, they talked about how Seed Restaurant in Kaimuki came to be. Well, this is how they came to be a married couple and found their mission in life.
I am a product of the late 60s, which was a stormy time, and my parents were from the San Francisco Bay Area. They were from the Haight-Ashbury. They were those people, right? So I was born in 67, and their marriage lasted about 3 or 4 days after my birth. So they split up. My mother at that point was not in a position to have me, so my dad took me. A few years later, out of the blue, she had gotten remarried. She challenged for custody. There was a custody battle in the courts. In those days, the judges just awarded the kid to the mom. I didn't even know my mom at that point. And so my dad kidnapped me, which was probably the moral thing to do, if not the legal thing to do. So from that point forward, I spent my childhood running around the country, hiding from the cops, living under assumed names, living on the margins of socioeconomic survivability, sort of underground. I remember when I eventually started school, I didn't even know what my real name was. When things got a bit more stable for us later, in older childhood, my dad remarried a woman from Pearl City way. And so I got to spend a portion of my childhood here on the island and sort of adopted by a whole family here. I grew up mostly on the west coast of the mainland in a small mill town, very economically depressed. In my early school days, I remember people thinking that I actually had learning disabilities, that I was dyslexic, and a lot of teachers were concerned. And then I had an older friend. He was the son of some babysitters that were very dear to me. And he was a gifted kid. He got into a talented and gifted program. And I turned to my grandmother and I said, "Am I gifted?" And everybody laughed and said, "Well, no, honey, you're not gifted in that way." And I resolved in my interior from that moment on, I would be a gifted kid. And the next year they tested me in school. They tested my IQ, and I tested, off the charts high. From that moment on, they put me in the gifted program. I asked my 5th grade teacher, I remember the moment, "What's the best school in the world?" And for whatever reason, he said Stanford University in Palo Alto is the best school in the world. And so I resolved, that's where I will go. When it came time to apply to school, to colleges, I didn't have any money to apply anywhere else. But there were a couple of schools that were interested in me as a football player. I used to play football in high school, and they waived my application fee. And so I applied to 4 colleges, 3 of them recruiting me to play football, and then Stanford, which didn't. A part of the scholarship application process was that you had to tell a really good story about yourself. And so I decided, before I even went to university, that I would be a political science major, that I would have a career in policy analysis or politics. And it became self-fulfilling. I got to school and I started taking classes. I really liked them. It's a very broad topic. You get a little history, a little sociology, a little philosophy, a little economic analysis. It was a great match for me. One gift that my parents did give me, especially my dad, was an understanding of socioeconomic classes, the haves and the have-nots.
He's always had a very strong commitment to justice. That's part of growing up. I went to Punahou School. I grew up, in his mind, on the wrong side of the tracks. He came from the other side, a lot of struggle in his family, a lot of compassion for folks who are on the fringe. And so it's always been a very, very core issue for him to see equality, to see kind of an end to elitism.
When I first got to Stanford, to be quite honest with you, my dominant emotion was fear. I thought, I don't know who I am vis-a-vis the rest of these people. I don't know if I can fit in here.
I went to Stanford University for college, and my very first day on campus, moved into the dorm room, went for breakfast with my older sister, opened the Frosh book, and right across from me on the opposite page was Jordan Seng, who appeared to be Chinese since he had the last name Seng, and the picture was kind of dark, and oh, Miss Bihapa.
And we were, as it turned out, housed in adjacent dorms. And so she met me, she realized I was that guy. She was crushing on me a little bit, and eventually she invited me to her Christian fellowship group. So we were both people of faith, and we got to know each other that way.
We had a lot of things in common, and got to know each other well, and we're married 6 years later. We just celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary.
I graduated from Stanford in 3 years, and all of my friends had another year left. Stanford is in Palo Alto, California, one of the richest cities in the country. Right across the 101 freeway is East Palo Alto, California, which at the time was the national per capita murder rate leader. It's a place where cops feared to tread. So I, of course, moved into East Palo Alto, California with a couple buddies. We rented this huge house. We opened it up. We invited these homeless people and these addicts and prostitutes off the street to live with us. And we did just crazy things that you do when you're 21 years old and trying to change the world. We just kind of broke down every boundary that we could think of. And that was the expression of our faith, a community of faith built up around it. When I was living in East Palo Alto, I paid my rent by working part-time at the Hoover Institute, which is a think tank at Stanford. I had been hired as a research associate there. A couple years into that, I felt like, all right, I kind of need to decide how I'm going to make a living, because living with a bunch of homeless people in the ghetto does not pay really well. And I thought, well, the one thing I've always been good at is scholarship, is academics, so maybe I should go to grad school and think of an academic career. A few months later, the issue came up for me again. It's like, you have to figure out what you're going to do to make a living in life. On that day, I received this letter from the University of Chicago, which is the one place that I had applied. It was a place that was recommended to me by my fellows at the Hoover Institute. And they accepted me, and they gave me a full ride scholarship. Within 2 weeks, I decided on grad school. I proposed to Sonya, asked her to marry me, and within 3 months we had moved across the country to Chicago.
I graduated from Stanford with a double major in music and English, and I always thought that I knew that music would be important to me and that writing would be important. So those are skills and passions that I've carried all through my careers. I ended up, when Jordan was in graduate school, I ended up getting involved in professional theater in Chicago. So I got my SAG and AFTRA and my equity card. I did, musical theater. That was my first way into it. And then it led to, bit parts in TV shows and then print modeling.
There are more twists and turns in Jordan and Sonya Seng's story, which we'll share with you in part 2 next month.